Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar will headline WrestleMania 38 Night 2, capping off the most stupendous WrestleMania in history with what will be their third time closing the show at the grandest stage of them all. It might be the first match to go on last at 3 separate WrestleManias, but it's not the first match to be booked multiple times at the Super Bowl of sports entertainment. As we gear up for the Big Dog and the Beast Incarnate's WrestleMania threequel, let's look back on some other matches that were deemed so big that one Mania go-around simply was not enough. I'm Stupendous Adam Pacitti from Stupendous Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 WrestleMania matches that happened more than once. Stupendous. Number 10, YOKOZUNA vs Bret Hart. It's rare for 2 WWE title matches to headline 2 different WrestleManias, and it's rarer still for 2 WWE title matches to headline back-to-back WrestleManias. The only match to hold that distinction is YOKOZUNA vs Bret Hart, which closed out both WrestleManias 9 and 10. And what a tale of 2 matches, or rather outcomes, it was. While the bulk of the bouts was generally pretty similar and told a familiar story, the endings were like night and radioactive hot dog colored skin. Sorry, I mean day. In the first, the Hitman dropped the strap after taking a handful of salt to the eyes, only for Hulk "I'll get the belt back for you, brother" Hogan to waltz in and steal the spotlight and the title in a pitiful post-match display. In the second, Bret finally managed to topple the Samoan super heavyweight and reclaim his crown, while the locker room emptied out, parading him on their shoulders as a sold-out Madison Square Garden cheered on. One of those is slightly better than the other, don't you think? Number 9, the Hardy Boys versus the Dudley Boys versus Edge and Christian. At WrestleMania 2000, the Hardys, Dudleys, and Edge and Christian were given the perfect opportunity to steal the show on their collective WrestleMania debuts. In the first ever triangle ladder match, the 6 risk takers put it all on the line with a breathtaking stunt show fought over the WWE Tag Team titles. Easily the match of the night, all 3 teams created WrestleMania moments that evening, with Jeff Hardy's massive swanton bomb in the aisleway becoming a highlight reel staple for years to come. 1 year later, they got the chance to do it all again, only this time with added tables and chairs in a direct rematch of the first TLC match from SummerSlam 2000. Inside a packed Houston Astrodome, they upped the ante with even more incredible and risky stunts, the match being further differentiated thanks to some memorable cameos from Lita, Rhino, and Spike Dudley. On both occasions, the cocky Canadians walked away with the straps, but the reputations of everyone involved were elevated. About 15 feet in the air, actually, before being sent crashing through a table. Number 8, Brock Lesnar vs Goldberg. Brock Lesnar vs Goldberg was a WrestleMania dream match that turned into a complete and utter nightmare for everyone involved. A special SmackDown vs Raw Battle of the Big Boys with special guest referee Steve Austin inserted to add even more star power, it was one of the most prominently advertised bouts at Mania 20. But when the MSG audience found that both the Next Big Thing and The Man were leaving the company immediately following the event, they completely turned on it, giving them a bitter swan song to forget. Brock and Billy didn't help their cases by having a match that would have been rotten regardless of the crowd response. They simply could not be arsed. Thankfully, things were much different 13 years later, when the 2 warhorses met over the Universal title. Having a compact and explosive match that hit all the right notes, the Big Bulls had the match they really should have had the first time around, and more than made up for their previous stinker. Number 7, Triple H vs The Undertaker. The story of the trilogy of matches between The Undertaker and Triple H at WrestleMania is really best viewed as part of the wider story between them and Shawn Michaels. While at their first Mania meeting, the Heartbreak Kid wasn't involved, even though it was rumored he was going to be before the dreaded personal demons prevented his participation, his presence was certainly felt in their second and especially third outings. The first match at WrestleMania X7 was certainly decent, but the other 2 are on a different level. The game clashed with the Phenom in a bruising no-holds-barred scrap at WrestleMania 27, a year after Taker had retired Hunter's best buddy and DX teammate. Then at WrestleMania 28, it all came together for the end of an era Hell in a Cell war, with The Undertaker beating Triple H inside the steel structure while Michaels acted as special guest referee. All 3 matches have their merits, but the Cell tops them all as far as intensity, drama, and storytelling are concerned. It was the perfect ending to the saga, and it's a really good thing they left it at that, isn't it? Number 6, The Rock vs. John Cena. Once in a lifetime? Sod it, do it twice. Yes, even though WWE conned the lot of us by claiming that The Rock and John Cena were only going to wrestle each other once, I must say, sorry, there's no end to that sentence actually. I'm still ruddy bloody mad that Vince McMahon deceived us all by saying this would only happen once. It was on billboards and everything. Anyway, WWE actually announced the first match at Mania 28 1 year ahead of time, ramping up the anticipation at the earliest possible opportunity. The match itself was a blockbuster and more than lived up to the hype. WWE would certainly have been happy with the business it generated, since that WrestleMania turned out to be the highest grossing pay-per-view in company history, with a staggering 1,217,000 buys. That almost certainly factored into the decision to book the rematch the following year, only this time with The Rock's WWE title on the line. The sequel wasn't quite so electrifying, but the event still did over 1 million buys and gave WWE the torch-passing moment they craved at the end of what, to date, is the Great One's last proper match. Sorry, Eric Rowan. Number 5, Hulk Hogan vs. Andre the Giant. Everyone remembers Hulk Hogan body slamming the 12-foot-tall, 950-pound Andre the Giant in front of 4 billion people in the Pontiac Silverdome at WrestleMania 3. Well, that's how Hulk Hogan remembers it anyway, but though the figures may have been exaggerated over the years, WrestleMania 3 was and is a historic event and a landmark moment in WWE history. And it was Hogan and Andre's WWE title match that drew the masses, even if the match itself wasn't exactly anything to write home about outside of the iconic finish. A year later, WWE booked the return bout. Not as the main event of WrestleMania 4 though, but as a quarter-final match in the tournament for the vacant WWE title. Even though they weren't headlining, the two were naturally front and center when it came to the show's promotion. Ending in a double disqualification after a sorry 5 minutes, the match wasn't exactly a classic, as it became ever more apparent that Andre's physical condition was quickly deteriorating. Even though the Giant was barely mobile, I still blame Hulk Hogan for the lack of quality, because I will always blame Hulk Hogan for things that he's involved in, and even some that he's not. Number 4, Shawn Michaels vs. The Undertaker. Two of the greatest performers in WrestleMania history finally going toe-to-toe at the granddaddy of them all was a moment to savor for expectant fans. Stealing the show at WrestleMania 25 with an all-time classic for the ages, the Phenom and HBK proved to everyone that they were only getting better with age. The match had a little bit of everything and was probably, at that point, the first time people really felt like the streak was in serious jeopardy. Despite being two of WWE's most revered legends and the big stage they were wrestling on, the storyline going into it really wasn't that hot, and WWE positioned them third from the top, going on before the two world title matches, which could not hope to follow it. The following year, WWE gave them a main event platform for the rematch, which came with the added stipulation that Michaels would have to retire should he fail to end the streak. It was an absolute thriller and the perfect match for one of the industry's greats to bow out on. Again, it's a really good thing he left it at that, isn't it? Number 3, Batista vs. Triple H. The storyline heading into the main event of WrestleMania 21 was masterful. The slow burn babyface turn of Batista, who won the Royal Rumble and surprisingly chose to face World Heavyweight Champion and Evolution leader Triple H, hit all the right notes and set the table perfectly for the student versus mentor showdown. In a spot that was originally earmarked for Randy Orton before his own sadly premature babyface turn killed his heat, Big Dave overcame the cerebral assassin in what turned out to be a compelling brawl. It was the program, match, and moment that made Batista a megastar and someone the company would build around going forward. 14 years later, Batista, having largely left wrestling after establishing himself as a force in Hollywood, showed up to run back his feud with Hunter and have just one last match before retiring from the business for good. At WrestleMania 35, the friends come enemies met under no-holds-barred stipulations. It was, what's the kind way of saying slightly embarrassing? Shameful? Demeaning? A load of self-indulgent, overly long bollocks on a show that was already way too long and self-indulgent to begin with? Yeah, it's the last one. Let's go with that. Number 2, The Undertaker vs. KANE. WWE showed admirable restraint in waiting a full 6 months until they booked KANE and The Undertaker together in a singles match. After the Big Red Machine's incredible debut at Bad Blood, WWE let the wacky story play out for half a year before they came face face to mask at the Showcase of the Immortals. Because of that, their WrestleMania 14 match had a special aura to it, and despite not being a technical classic or anything, is fondly remembered to this day. The Brothers of Destruction would continue variously teaming and fighting one another for much of the next 6 years as their characters evolve, before they danced once more on the grandest stage. At WrestleMania 20, Taker returned in his dead man guise after ditching the whole big evil persona, bringing Paul Bearer back with him for the occasion. Once again, the match was hardly one you were going to wear your VHS tape out rewinding back, but it was an incredible moment, peaking with The Undertaker's spine-chilling entrance. Number 1, Steve Austin vs. The Rock. The first match to be booked on 3 separate WrestleManias, The Rock and Steve Austin faced each other at WWE's flagship event every other year between 1999 and 2003. Their first match at WrestleMania 15 was the weakest of the bunch, but it was still a very exciting and worthwhile headliner and did its best to make up for what had been a shabby show overall. The second match at WrestleMania X7 was a noticeable improvement, the two going hell for leather in front of a partisan Houston, Texas crowd. Even the ending, with the Texas Rattlesnake turning heel in front of his home state and aligning with Vince McMahon, could not quell the pure Attitude Era adrenaline the match produced. The third match at WrestleMania 19 would turn out to be Stone Cold's last, as his various injuries, notably his knackered neck, led him to call time on his in-ring career. It was another barn burner, and, fittingly, Austin went out on his back, putting his rival over clean in the middle before riding off into the sunset.